Hi all, I'm Trisha Peach, host of the Peach Buzz, and I'm so glad you guys are back with us again this week. I am stoked. Any of you who have met or heard Esther Moreno, you have been so blessed, and I'm really excited. I didn't even have to blackmail her today to have her come on. I would have done whatever it took. But I first got to meet her in person on a trip to the Bahamas right after Hurricane Dorian. We were on a trip out there. I had never been to the Bahamas before. I was blown away. It was honestly one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. And in the middle of all that devastation, just so much beauty.
Yeah.
And it was really life-changing. I think I learned a lot of skills there, and I took her class on developing your social media, and I'm like taking a billion notes. It was awesome. And one of the things I was most drawn to was just her energy, her joy, and her love for Jesus and kids. And I was like, I would love to talk to her about this. And then she was also teaching at CPC in January. If you look back in my videos to the January CPC one, she taught a standing room only class on having difficult conversations in your church. And specifically, those of you that are not from the United States also probably know that we've had just horrific racial, we've had death and violence and unrest and division. It's been scary. And I can't even imagine what that has been like for someone who is a person of color.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, because and she had a standing room only crowd, so there's a lot of people that wanted to know. And she's mentioned before that she is one of the few African American children's pastors, a Voice in Kids ministry today, which is so, I don't know why that is. And I wish I did, because we need to change that. Another one I know, he'd be Bahamian American, his pastor would be Ricardo Miller, who's a legend. He's been doing this so long, and he is just a legend at it.
Absolutely.
He was actually,
I would call him a knucklehead too, as well.
He's the first one that was ever on my show when I first launched it.
Wow.
We ran into each other at a conference in Michigan. And he's like, oh yeah, sure. That was so cool.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm wondering, if you don't mind. Oh, and first, if you could just let the people at home know, I'm sure they know who you are, but if you'd let them know who you are and your book, because I'd love for them to check out your book. It has gotten such phenomenal reviews. And you're launching a new ministry, I understand.
My name is Esther Moreno, and I am the founder of Child Heart LLC, which is really dedicated towards training leaders to really go forth in a spirit of excellence in how they reach children and families. I now have 3 books: Children's Ministry Moving Forward. I have the Children's Ministry Wake Up Call, which is really about waking up to what's going on in the world and how we can really effectively reach children. And a recent book, actually, I published this during the pandemic. Maybe it's because I had more time on my hands. But that one is called The Progressive Children's Ministry Leader. It is not political at all. I have heard, people are scared of the word progressive. But it's actually just the definition of progressive, which is just moving forward. So it is all about moving forward when it comes to leading a department, and just some of the laws and principles that we should follow when we are trying to be excellent in what we do. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. And as you have heard, Trisha has mentioned, I do have a new ministry called Esther on Demand, which is something, oh my goodness, Trisha, it has been in the works for so long. I don't think that people understand all of the work that you have to put in the back end to make certain things happen. But this is definitely one of those things that I'm like, is it ever going to happen? And it finally happened. But it's really just a training platform for churches across the country. I think that it's hard. We want to train our people. We want to go forth in that spirit of excellence, but sometimes we can't afford it. Sometimes we can't afford to bring someone down. And so this kind of takes all of the excuses out, and it is available to rent, or to own, and it doesn't go over $100, and you too can create a incredible training for your children's ministry team, or even just for yourself. Hey, get in and watch it yourself and take the information and then just put it out in the atmosphere. I am not, against people taking my stuff, because it's not my stuff, it's God's stuff, and he gave it to somebody else who don't live here, who might live all the way in Africa, and he put it in their spirits too. And I would just take it and crush it and kill it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So I love what you said about no excuses. So you say, well, I hear that all the time. Well, I'm a small church. We can't afford to go to conference. Well, we can't afford to go to this training. There's a lot of free training out there. Yeah. I've seen that, but it's an awesome thing to invest too, because some of the free stuff, you don't really look into it. You need to put some, they call it skin in the game, or some blood, sweat, and tears into it. If you pay for it, you're 9 times as likely to actually do it. I think you need to check it out. I'm putting the links to her books right here down below. You need to click on them. I have not read The Progressive Children's Leader yet. I need to read that one because I absolutely loved the Children's Ministry Wake Up Call. Fantastic. You guys should go get that. But I'm putting all the links down below. Click on it. Check it out. There really isn't any excuse. And I think one of the worst problems we have is somebody gets their training 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and they said, I've been there, I've done that. Yeah. Okay, well, children have changed. The culture has changed. Yep. It's like you're screaming at kids in Mandarin and then going, well, it's their fault because I tried. Yeah. No, you're a missionary to kids. You better learn the language and you better speak it. And that means ongoing training. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Trisha, I think that is so important. I think, I go to these conferences, I see people in tears in the workshops having to do with volunteers and retainment and keeping that, and you don't understand this and you don't understand that, and this is what's going on. But I think when it comes to the future of children's ministry, it's not just about kids, it's not just about reaching kids. It's about reaching, yes, we want to reach children, but we want to reach the parents as well. Yes. We want to reach the children's ministry workers who are laboring alongside us. What are we doing to reach them? What are we doing to disciple them and to help them to grow in their faith and to grow in their maturity? That is the sticking point to me. So when we are so busy, which I think is so easy for children's ministry leaders, we get, especially if you're head of the department, you get so busy doing all the work. I've seen children's ministry leaders who are just, they are like, I am teaching, I am leading, I am, I'm doing this. And they don't have any time to do the stuff they're supposed to be doing because they're doing everything that they're supposed to be training other people to do. Yes. So I think it's so important that, we wake up to what true training and discipleship is and our responsibility, especially if we're the head of the department, what our responsibility is in doing that.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. Now, a big question that I am thrilled to, that I really want to ask. I would say, if anything described the last few years, would be division. Yeah. And I don't know if your church dealt with this, but ours did. And a lot of churches I heard of did, where some churches said you have to wear a mask to come in. And then you'd have people leaving the church saying, I'm not going to do that. So then some churches said, we're not requiring masks. So then the other half would leave because you're not requiring them, I'm not going. And it would turn really political. Yeah. And a lot of stuff with the elections turned extremely political. Yeah.
I'll tell you, Trisha, I was very bad at wearing a mask. It had nothing to do with politics. I just hated it. I would like sneak out to the grocery store and I was just rip it off. And I'm like, Lord, if I perish, I perish. I mean, I was just, and when you are leading kids and you were sweating and you were on a stage, it was just so hard for me. And I came from a family that was very sensitive. My mom and my dad, they were very sensitive. And if we look at the numbers, you know, in regards to who were affected the most, it was African Americans.
Yes.
So I was definitely, as an African American, it was definitely something that I took serious. But it was so funny because, you know, I post on social media. So my family's like, back home in Chicago, they're like, stay away from us. We see you on social media and you're not wearing a mask. I'm like, I'm living my best life. But I always try to be, you know, respectful, and did what was required of me. You know, I didn't go into a place and be like, I'm not wearing one. Definitely not one of those, but I could see how it can become very uncomfortable.
My mother, she just was like, no, I'm not. And you can't make me.
Yeah.
Because, you know, she's a lot higher risk than me.
Yeah.
I'm like, Mom, nope, not, can't make, Mom. And she's like, nope. If I perish, I perish. That was my mother. If I perish, I perish. I don't care. And Mom.
Like Queen Esther, if I perish, I perish.
Yes. She was like, I can't do it. Nope.
But there was an extreme amount of division.
Yes.
In our church. And I mean, I'll be honest, I felt like there was an extreme amount of division. As an influencer in children's ministry, it was very much there in that world too. And when you have a job that is not traditional, when your job is to be an influencer, you are exposed. You know, I know so many people who are like, I'm out of here. I'm getting off of social media. I'm canceling my Facebook page, you know, and this and that. And I'm like, I can't do that. That's how I outreach.
Yes.
So I had to stay there and kind of be exposed to all of that. So for me, it was very difficult because you're exposed to it at church, with your local church, which is kind of that place for you where you get to rest and just kind of be, and it's like your private sanctuary. And then you're exposed to it in the ministry world. So I think for a lot of my friends around me, I think it affected them, but maybe a little bit differently. It affected me probably a little bit more because it was everywhere in my world. And I really believe the church, you know, we probably handled it the worst. You know, you have these secular corporations around the world who are like, what are we going to do to bring people together? And you saw the church, instead of what Christ has called us to do, to be unified and to come together, we were just ripping apart. And the enemy continued to throw fuel on the fire through every season and every situation and occurrence that would happen in our world. So for me, it actually led to Guy and I, we actually had to leave our church, and we loved our church, and we loved the people, and we loved the pastors there. The pastor, I remember sitting with him in a meeting. We were just kind of talking about everything that was going on, and he was amazing. I mean, he grieved with me and he cried with me. And ultimately, I think it was probably a year and a half, where it was still a lot of division and things that were going on. And the decision that I made, it was really based off of my sanity. And the new voice that God was giving me on speaking on these things, because it was Trisha, it was so uncomfortable to talk about these things. You know, Guy and I are like not political at all. I think that we were like registered like independents here in Alabama because we're just not about politics. But it was a heaviness that was on me. And most of my audience is predominantly white. And just carrying that heaviness on you and feeling like you can't speak because you don't want to make someone feel a certain way. And what if your pain makes someone offend somebody? I mean, it's so many things that you think about that you shouldn't have to think about. We should all, you know, feel free to be open. But those were things that I constantly reflected on. So what happened was I just began to carry it instead of kind of let it out. So it kind of exploded kind of into this racial trauma that was something I had to deal with. And really the healing in that was when I began to speak out and speak up on the importance of us coming together and racial reconciliation and how important it is for us to be unified in children's ministry. And for me, that was a sphere of influence that God had given me in children's ministry. He has sent me to the ambassadors in the most fertile mission field in the world, the ones who deal with the babies, who raise up the next generation. So for me, it was a complete honor to be a part of that and to share my heart on that, and just really just through love. That's really how we did it. We did it through love. We did it through, not through media sound bites that sounded good with what we wanted to say, but we sat down with people. We had closed door coffee meetings. We read books with people and came together with them and loved on them and laughed. And together we grew, and together we learned, and just the grace that was just that shed on both parties in doing that, and just simply doing life together. If you would ask me, what is the way to bring about unity? Be willing to do life with someone who doesn't look like you, someone who is from a completely different world. You know, you got a farmer here and a city boy over here. Come together, you know, and just do life together. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. I mean, you just don't know. So you have to build that love, and you have to build that trust, which is why that component about building life together is so important. You know, I have a friend, Trisha, it's so funny. I sat down with him. I've done some work with him. I'm not going to say his name because I want to embarrass him, but we're complete opposites. He's like old white man. I'm like, I think I'm still in the young category. At least I look like it, young Black girl. I should say I'm a woman now, but
yes, but young woman.
Yes. And we come together, and you can tell, you know, we are not on the same side of certain things, but I love talking and leaning into those conversations. And it's never serious. Like we're just laughing together because there's this trust, because I know he loves me. You know, there was a season where you remember this, Trisha, people were recommending all these books to help people to understand, you know, how to come together when it came to the racial unrest.
Yes.
And my friend, he says to me, I don't want to read no book. Those books are long. And I just laughed. And it was so funny to me because I know that he loves me. And, you know, for me, I'm like, I'm going to find you a 10-minute documentary because I think that's more your speed.
Yeah, because my husband would say, I'm waiting for the book or the movie. I want to see the movie. Yeah. And I think what bothered me the most is when you say it's worse with the church, I agree, because sometimes they end up jumping to this whole thing of, okay, if you, I'll just say it, voted this or went to this or didn't do this, or if you believe this or you have questions about this, therefore you are not a Christian.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to hang out with you. Like I saw that in graduate school, we had a larger cohort, and this one girl from Texas expressed some political views, and there were several of the classmates then that said, we're not even going to eat with you. And then there were two others then that went, oh, well, then you must be on this side. Then I'm not going to sit on your side of the, and I thought, oh my gosh, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I thought,
I think you have to have, I think this is why we have to do life together.
Right.
And we have to have grace for the fact that people grow up in their own vacuum. Everyone grows up in their own vacuum. It's not just those people over there. We all have our vacuums that we grow up in. We all have the worldviews that we pick up on based off of our cultures and the environments that we have grown up in. And I think that we need to be filled more with grace for those. I think moving to Alabama, which was funny because we were from Chicago. So when guys said we were moving here, I was having a panic attack. I had never been to Alabama. The only thing I've heard about Alabama was the civil rights movement. And I am having like this panic attack. And we come here and you just learn so much, even with the Confederate flags are here everywhere. I mean, they are just waving in the wind and just blowing like the American flag here. And it can be horrifying when you are a person of color. But even leaning into the difficult and the scary and learning, you know, we've had friends who are like, hey, I don't believe that you should be a slave. And this for me, this is Southern pride, you know, and it's based off of how they grew up, the stories they were told, what they were taught. And we have to really come together and love on one another. And that makes people teachable and open. When we are fighting, when we are divided, when we say, I don't care how you grew up, you're ignorant, and that's the only thing you need to know, then the enemy wins. He wins when we respond in that way. So I think it's so important for us to connect and have grace when it comes to that. And listen to each other's stories. Listen to how people who don't look like you have grown up, you know.
And I love what you said about it starts with grace and listening to others and love. Oh my gosh, that sounds like a Christian. Okay, so you've taught on this, I know, at several conferences. You've been so busy. You had a women's conference not long back. So you've been doing a lot of teaching. You've been asked to speak a lot on this subject, as well as a myriad of other ones. What would you say if you've got a children's pastor that's going into a new situation and he or she, they're sitting down with their leaders, their volunteers, and they quickly pick up on, okay, some of these are more conservative, some of these are more liberal, or not, they're not political at all. How would they navigate that? And I know, I would say when I was in Dayton, it was a much more diverse staff and a diverse team than what I've had now in Wisconsin. Central rural Wisconsin. What should maybe we all be keeping in mind? I mean,
well, Trisha, I think that we have to be super intentional with what we allow to come in and kind of, because I mean, when we don't shut things down, they'll come in and just blow up our spaces right before our very eyes, when that was never our intention. You know, so I just think it's so important to be intentional and shut down those conversations. And you mentioned, you know, I just came from a women's retreat. And it was so funny because I was sitting with this woman, and, you know, people are always going to guess, you know, what side they think, you know, that you're on. I mean, as an African-American, come on, a lot of people think I'm a Democrat. I mean, that's just how it is. Like, they think I'm BLM Democrat, but, you know, and I just kind of, you know, just let all of that go, because really Guy and I are like right in the center. I say this, how I say, we're right in the center. Guy and I are Jesus. Like, right?
Jesus.
Jesus at the center. And this woman, she tried to connect with me. And it was, you know, an all white women's retreat. The only African-American was me. I'm sorry, the only person of diverse minority anything was me, which is so humbling to me. But I'm there, and for her, you know, she's obviously on the left, and she just assumes that that's kind of where I am. And so her way to kind of connect with me was to bash like Donald Trump, you know, and she's just like, yeah, and they put that idiot in office, and I shut her down immediately. One, I couldn't believe she said that. We were sitting at a table with other women from all walks of life. You don't know where they stand, where they represent. Right. You just excluded anyone who is on this side, you know. And I shut it down and I said, hey, I don't do that. I don't do that. And you know, I explained to her, you know, she knows my husband. I said, Guy and I are not political. We're just not, we don't get into that, but we do get into Jesus.
Yes.
So if you want to talk about Jesus, I will talk about him, you know, all day.
Yes.
And I remember that a woman, she had passed me later, and she looked at me, she pointed to me. She said, you're the real deal. You're the real, because she saw that. I think we have to be intentional on shutting those conversations down.
Yes.
In children's ministry, I'll say that I've been invited when it comes to this issue on a lot, because it's raised an awareness on different things that we may have to tackle in children's ministry. You know, one of them, Trisha, I'll tell you, when we moved to Alabama, we had an experience with our son. He was in kindergarten and he just had a really rough time. By the time he got to, 2020, March of 2020 in kindergarten, he was ripped out, because of the global pandemic. Like most kids across the country were ripped out of schools. Well, so he was a part of that COVID gap group. And then first grade, we were in, out, in, out, in, out. Oh. But I remember every time he had to go, he would just cry. He would cry. And, at that time, we were part of a predominantly white church. And we were part of a predominantly white children's ministry. That's just what we did. And I helped to serve in our local church. And he's crying. We're thinking maybe it's because he hates school but it was too intense. We're like, something's wrong.
Yes.
And he sits me down one day and he grabs my face. He said, please, can you just come here in the room? So I get down on my knees to be kind of like at eye level. And he grabs my face and he says, Mommy, please don't make me go. The other kids don't like me because I'm brown. They don't like me because I'm brown. And of course, as a mom, you're like reaffirming him that, oh my goodness, that is so not true. That's so not true. And you're amazing. And anybody who wants, and I'm sitting there. And it was so painful for me because you're dropping off your kid in the car line, thinking you're dropping them off to a war zone and feeling like the teacher basically confirmed that it did happen.
Oh my gosh.
She really follow back with us on what she was doing to kind of, make it better. Because there was an incident, on the playground. Oh my gosh. And he was told you're not allowed to play with us because brown kids can't play this game. And that was kind of where he got the
my gosh.
Brown. So it was the most as a mother, I couldn't even imagine, it was just the most difficult situation. But I thought to myself, what does that mean in children's ministry? What happens when we have a little boy like my son who's sitting in the back in children's ministry? How are we reaching them?
Oh my goodness.
And just opening up the minds to children's ministry leaders across the country of how that should be a special need. That should be seen special need.
Yes.
That we need to be intentional on when someone comes in who doesn't represent what everyone else looks like. Yes. We should make sure and be intentional to make sure that, all of those pieces are together and that they feel super loved. Yes. And that may mean we have to step out of our comfort zone. This may mean we may have to do a little bit more over here, but it's totally worth it. But what's funny, it caused us to look even deeper into things, because we would have issues with our daughter when she was younger, with her thinking white skin was prettier than brown skin. Oh. And I was a children's pastor. I didn't know where she was getting this from. We know it's all about Jesus in children's ministry. And it was so funny. It was a curriculum, Trisha, that we were using at the church.
Oh my gosh.
We were talking about Revelations, right? This is great, right? Because every tribe, every tongue, and I remember. And I know the creator of this was not paying attention to this at all.
No.
But they had the different, cultures and races and all of that. Of course, they kind of look like peasants. Mm-hmm. But when they showed God and Jesus and all the angels, they were all white, blonde hair, and blue eyes. And I think that we don't realize that is sending a message, to kids who don't represent, that race or that culture, that, whiteness is connected to purity. That's what it was doing for my kids. It's connected to beauty and purity and holiness. And that all they represented was something that was different. So I didn't realize the war that we were fighting in children's ministry and how we need to be intentional, even in those spaces and what, and I've talked to churches who are like, and part of my story is I've been thrown, it's by choice. It's not, I've been thrown into predominantly white spaces. I love white people. But that's just kind of where I landed. And it has been a journey, and I think that it's a reason. I have so much grace. One of my friends, I was texting a friend today because I felt like somebody was bullying her online with a comment, and I'm like, I will knock you out if you mess with my old white friend right here.
Well, I know what you're saying because I remember this was a long time back when I started in kids ministry, and they were talking about you need to really look at the pictures you have around your church.
Yeah.
You need to look at the pictures you have on the wall. And I was like, oh, that can't be. Again, with my Caucasian mindset, I'm embarrassed that it didn't even click with me.
Yeah.
I walked around our church building and there were all kinds of pictures of a white Jesus with white kids.
Yeah.
And then over the baptismal, white Jesus being baptized, all white disciples. So the light went on, and we had posters that were from our curriculum. From our curriculum that were in the kids ministry rooms with white families and white angels, which is not how they're described in scripture at all. Talks about them looking,
which is funny to me as an African American, because I would make jokes about that, you know, before I really kind of came along and realized, oh, I'm supposed to be an influencer and inspire people to be better.
I was shocked. I was shocked. I had to go around our church and change a lot of things, change a lot of the pictures we'd had up since the 1940s or 50s, not thinking and having to be intentional on that. Now, I had an eye-opening for several years now. I have flown down to Mississippi in August. They have this church there has an awesome outreach where they get together with a bunch of churches, and I come in and speak for kids ministry. And the first time they called me, I was like, sure, no problem. And I was working on what I was going to say and what their theme was. And he said, look, I have to talk to you about something. It's a little difficult. And I said, okay. You know, I'd never been to Mississippi before. And he said, well, I don't want you to be offended, but I just feel like you should know that you'll be the only white person at the conference. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. And he's like, no, you don't understand. I feel like you need to know you'll be the only white person in the city. And I said, okay. And he's like, but I really need you to understand, just so we're completely clear, that you'll be the only white person in the county.
Wow.
And I said, okay, I'm kind of smiling. And then he said, you also need to know what you're getting into, that we just integrated the public schools. And I said, can you repeat that? He said, we have a tense situation right now because they said desegregation went through in 1968, I believe it was. He said, we just now integrated our schools, and neither sets of families are happy. The African-American families and the white families are not happy. The teachers aren't happy. And now they've just now, and I'm sitting here going, are you kidding me? You just now? And he said, well, I just thought you should know. Before you land. He said, just don't say anything about that. You need to be, just cognizant of the fact that, and I was just shocked that in the US, this was the situation. But when I got there, the labels that we put on things, I come from Pentecostal tradition, and their church is Baptist. They're not Baptist. They were not Baptist. No. And they're like, yeah, we're a Baptist church. And so I'm in the service on Sunday morning, and it was just Jesus. It was Jesus. And we're all up there just praying for people together. And I'm learning a lot. And they said, well, boy, you didn't get too freaked out by our services. And I said, you're not Baptist. And they're like, oh, yes, we are. We were, the Pentecostals just haven't caught up yet. And it's true. And I thought, this is probably what heaven's going to be like, it's all about Jesus. So I've told people before, the label you put on the door sure doesn't mean much. It's about, I had so much fun. They got me to eat hush puppies and pickled eggs. Because I told them I'll do it on a dare.
Trisha, I have seen you. I know you can hold your own in a crowd where you were the only one who looks like you. I've been to the Bahamas with you. And the kids are in love. So
I had so much fun. I did think I was going to die. And that was more because I'm from northern Wisconsin originally, where it's like always 0 degrees. You know, you're from Chicago. And then it was October and 107 in the shade. And I thought, I'm going to die. I'm going to die for Jesus right here because there's no aircon in this school. And I'm just like sweat melt everywhere. And the kids are like,
oh my goodness. And they loved it. And they loved you. And I'm like, this is amazing.
I thought that, man, I think the older I get, I realize the more I have to learn.
Yeah.
The more I don't know anything.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more I learn, the more I realize I'm still just scratching the surface.
Yeah. And I think if more of us had that perspective that we don't know what we don't know, you know, and just as hard to grow and to learn and know that we don't have it all together and know that we don't have the entire story.
Yes.
And that those whom God has placed around us are there to teach us as well. Not always us to teach them, but for them to kind of teach us and help us. So I think that really the world will be the church. Let me say the church of Christ. That has been the devastating sticking point when it comes to division. For me, it has been the body of Christ. If we would just sit and listen, you know, and know that I don't know the whole story. I don't know why she said that. And what she said is insensitive and it's breaking my heart and it hurts my feelings. I don't know why they're on that side. I don't know why they support this, but if we would just come together and listen to want to really listen. I think that we will be a mighty force and the enemy
I agree.
will be trembling.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Listen and just really reflect the image of Christ, you know, what we've been called to do in the first place. I think that a lot of things will be different. I think it will be different. You know, I think speaking up, using our voices. And I'll say that because that was something that was really scary for me, was to use my voice and to speak up. And it was actually, I tell people this because it was Reggie Joyner who would call me and just have conversations with me, just to check on me. And I'm like, why are you being like the most amazing friend in the world when I'm just completely broken and devastated constantly, just throughout the year? Check on me. Hey, have these conversations with me, and just to import his heart for unity, you know, and for the Church of Christ to come together, which wasn't a political message at all. It was just, he really had an authentic heart for that. Yes. And I remember he would have these conversations with me, and it was actually, I'll tell you, it wasn't anybody Black who pushed me to or inspired me to speak out. It was a white man who gave me permission to be me and to speak more freely. And when he saw the pain that I was going through, and just acknowledging and reminding me of who I am, that you are an influencer. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to cry over these things. It's okay to grieve the division of the church. Yes. But people listen to you. So you need to open up it was really a Queen Esther season for me, of going before the king. And if I perish, I perished. If I get kicked out of this table that I fought so hard to be invited to, I get kicked out, because we need to talk about these things. We need to lean into these courageous conversations. The enemy will not have the last word. It is already done. It was already won on the cross of Calvary.
Oh, I have chills.
Yeah. We just need to speak.
I have chills.
Yeah. So for me, my freedom came with my voice, learning how to use my voice and seeing how that has helped others. And yes, you were going to ruffle a few feathers. I mean, that's just a part of using your voice. Yes. But I walk in the confidence that God has given me this voice for a reason, to help people to see, to understand, to come back together, to listen, to do life with people who don't look like them, to be intentional when it comes to that in children's ministry, and to show people that you care. You know, for me in children's ministry, every time something happened and it had to do with the Black issue,
Oh,
everybody would run. They're like, "Oh shoot, here come Esther!" Bathroom all of a sudden.
I gotta go to the bathroom.
Because they didn't know because they loved me so much. It's because they loved me, and they didn't know what to say, so they said nothing, which put me in the most loneliest place that someone could be. Because really, it's better to say, I don't know what to say, but I love you. And I just hate the division. Yes. I don't know what to say, but this, I don't know. Because you're acknowledging I don't have all the answers. You need to do this, you need to do that, you know, but you're breaking those walls down and you're saying, I see you. And I think that's just really.
I love that right there. That is amazing to me, what you just said. I don't know what to say, but I love you and I hate the division.
Yeah. Yeah.
I grew up in very, very reserved culture, extremely, and where it's considered more Christian. Yeah. Do not say anything, and just don't say anything until you finally explode on somebody. Yeah. And Jesus called it out. He was not always nice. He would say something, and I liked what you said about shutting down that division when it starts, shutting it down, because I think sometimes that divisive stuff can be like a cancer.
Divisive spirit,
yes. And then you're going to have people dividing off, and in any group that you have, I've noticed you have one teacher that connects better with one group of kids and one teacher that connects better with the other. And so having a really diverse team is awesome. Yeah. Can be hard to keep them balanced, be, but I love what you say, speaking up right away. And I've had moments where I didn't know what to say. Yeah. And I love that, of just admitting, I don't know what to say, but I see you and I'm so sorry for this division. Yeah. Yeah. Because that's such a huge, huge thing. Because again, in the reserve culture I'm from, they'll just not say anything. Yeah. Yeah. And absolutely back off. When I love what you said about sitting down with somebody and having coffee with them, and having the courage to say, why did you say that? Yeah. I want to know why. I want to know why you did that. Tell me your story. Yeah. Yeah. You know, Guy and I, actually, Guy, we have a friend and he's been reading a book, and they would just meet at a coffee shop, and they would just, they everything they talk about is based off of what they're learning from this book. It's called Beyond Colorblind. And I always recommend this book because it's like 101. It's not political at all. I believe it's by an Asian woman, but it's just an amazing introduction. And they've been reading it, you know, just together. And they have these conversations. They, you know, what is white privilege? I don't believe in white privilege. I've gone through these things and I don't believe I'm privileged, you know, but just having the freedom of two people who love each other, having those conversations in love and just listening has just been transformative. So yeah, it is so important to have those conversations, to speak out, you know. And so, how would the church be different if we could love each other and listen and trust and never stop learning and listen to those that look different from us and think differently than we do? Wow, I love it. Oh my gosh. So if somebody listening to this right now, I read all the comments that they put down below, but if they wanted to get hold of you, if they wanted to ask a question about what you said, or maybe try to get you to come to their conference, how would they get a hold of you? What's the best way? So social media is the best way. I do have a website, www.childheart83.com. But, you know, people would send me messages there and I'm like, oh, I never received a message. But if you follow me on Facebook at childheart83, or on Instagram at Heart of a Child 83, that is definitely a more successful way to reach me. And I'm putting all those links right down here, her Facebook page, the website, all of those things, click down below. Please check out her books. take a look at Esther to Go. You would love to have that kind of training at your church for you personally, but also for your team. Because if you don't have a team, why don't you have a team? You should be replacing yourself.
We're gonna get you.
We're gonna get you. You better have a team. But I love this, and I would like to keep this conversation going down in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. But please comment down below, like and subscribe on this channel if you like children's ministry content. We also do family ministry content. But I just want to thank Esther for coming on today. Anytime I hear she's speaking, I can't get enough. Her joy is just contagious. And I think this is such an important topic for the church right now. We should be setting the example for how to live in community. We should be setting the example for love and cheering each other on. And I still believe that that is a possibility, that that's what we need to be doing. So please check out her books, check out her website, get involved with Esther to Go, which is just now coming out. It's a ton of work. And we love you guys. Thank you for what you do for Jesus and his kids every week. We see you, and we hope this is encouraging to you and to your church. And I hope to see you next week on the Peach Buzz. Bye-bye.